Okay. One of the questions, so I've been saying that we see these differences, these kind of dominance hierarchies in school-age children and even more, in preschool children already, but even more in school-age children. How do you actually measure this? What people can do is actually make a kind of map of the social network, say, in a classroom. And they do this by using what are called sociometric measures. So basically what they do is they take a class of 30 children and then ask each one of the children to say how much they like or dislike each of their classmates, or to say who's the person that they like the most, or who's the person they like the least, or who's the person they play with the most, or who's the person they play with the least. And then you can take all those individual judgments. So you can ask each child about all the other children in the classroom, and then you can take all those individual measurements and put them together to find out what the map looks like for the entire class. And it turns out, not too surprisingly, that there's actually a lot of consistency. So in general, children like the same other children and dislike the same other children. And what happens when you do this kind of sociometric map, again, not too surprisingly, is that you find that where children are in the peer pecking order depends on things like how attractive they are, how good they are at sports, how social they are, etc. But it's also influenced by who their friends are. So it isn't entirely that each individual child is being judged on their own. It also depends on whether you can be friends with the other kids who are the more popular kids. So again, making alliances in a school-age context is actually just as important as establishing where you are in the pecking order. So one thing is where you're in the pecking order, and that has a lot to do with just your particular features. But whether you have alliances with other people or not, may depend on how good you are at making those alliances more than anything about what you're like yourself. And again, if we're thinking about school-age period as practice for relationships later on, this business about making alliances, figuring out who you should be allied to and who you should be separate from, is very, very central to our adult social life. When you do this kind of sociometric analysis, what you discover is that there are kind of fairly typical categories that children fall into in terms of their peer structure. So there are the popular children who get lots of positive nominations, who everybody likes, who everybody wants to be friends with. There are also rejected children who the other children don't like and don't want to be friends with. And then there are children who are just not part of the group. These are the kind of children, if you thought of this as a map, they're children that are off here in the map all by themselves, who aren't interacting with the other children very much, the kind of solitary children. Then there's children who are just average. And then there are, interestingly, these controversial children who get many positive and many negative nominations. And often what will happen is that these kind of controversial children, I think of these as being sort of the freaks and geeks children, so they will make their own little peer group. And part of the whole point of being part of the freaks and geeks peer group is that you are not the popular kids, and you separate yourself off from the popular kids. So when you're actually trying to figure out what's going on with these different groups, when you look at the popular children, again, not too surprisingly, these are children that tend to be cooperative and sociable, and they often regulate their own emotions well. They tend to be actually less aggressive than average children. So they're the children who are, by and large, more socially skilled. But it's important to point out that, in fact, there's also a kind of subgroup of popular children who are aggressive, and interestingly, especially, tend to be girls who engage in what's called relational aggression. So physical aggression is going and beating somebody up. Relational aggression is teasing them or excluding them or being mean to them in all these kinds of social ways. And sometimes you get the kind of queen bee phenomenon of the girls who are perceived as being popular. It's a bit of a contradiction. They're popular, but nobody likes them. But that actually, what that kind of weird contradictory idea of the people who are popular but nobody likes is that they're people who are dominant, who are actually exercising power. Children are successfully exercising power over the other children, but they're doing it through aggression rather than through cooperation and initiation. Was there a question?
Sorry. I'm a little confused in terms of the difference between in ranking between average and controversial children.
Right.
Just the strength of the
Right. So the average children, what you've got is some other children will say, I kind of like that person not quite as much as I like other people, but more than I like some. And then other children might say, well, they're sort of in the middle. I dislike other children more. Whereas what happens to the controversial children is, to exaggerate half the class says, I really, really don't like that kid. I really don't want to like them and don't want to play with them. And then another group in the class says, oh no, that kid is really good. I really like them. They might even be the leader of the group of children who are part of it. So it's kind of sort of a bimodal distribution in reactions to the other child. Now, how about at the other end of the spectrum when we look at the rejected children? And they seem to fall into really two categories, again, sort of understandably. Some children get rejected because they're very aggressive, and they're aggressive in a kind of overall way, so they're aggressive to all the other children. And then some children seem to be rejected. So these are children who just are behaving in an aggressive way towards their peers very quickly. And one of the things that's interesting is that children seem to be incredibly sensitive to this. So that there are some studies that show, for instance, that if you do summer camps, my colleague Steve Hinshaw has done these summer camps, especially for children who have ADHD kinds of symptoms. And some of the children are aggressive and some of them aren't. And in one of the studies, within 5 minutes of the start of a summer camp with a group of children, they already had detected who the aggressive children were and were already labeling them as being aggressive and staying away from them. So within a very, very, very short time, children seem to be very sensitive to signals of aggression. So it's not kind of like just waiting for the kid to beat somebody up. They already can sense that this is the kid who's going to be aggressive, and they tend to reject the child as a result. Now, in some ways, it's interesting because it shows how sensitive the children are. But of course, what it also means is that those children there can be a kind of vicious cycle very easily, where then, of course, those children are being rejected, and that has the effect of making them more aggressive, which makes them more rejected, and so forth. So if you could kind of get those children not to be aggressive initially, then they might actually have a chance of breaking out of being in the category of being the aggressive, rejected children. So on the other hand, the withdrawn rejected children tend to be are not aggressive. They're the opposite of being aggressive. They're wary, timid, kind of outside of the group. These are the sort of children that get bullied, for example, in classrooms. But it's worth saying that not all socially withdrawn, timid, shy children are socially excluded. So some socially withdrawn children seem nevertheless to be able to negotiate relationships with other children in a successful way. And one of the really interesting questions is, why is it that some of the shy children end up getting bullied and picked on, and others of the shy children actually end up being among the popular children? Here's a point that I think is important, which I mentioned before when we were talking about social development and social cognition, and that is that the rejected children, particularly the aggressive rejected children, tend, even before they're actually rejected, to expect that they're going to be rejected. So there's quite a lot of evidence that when you look at this category, especially this category of aggressive rejected children, that what's actually happening is that if you, for instance, if you play these children a completely neutral video where someone accidentally bumps up against someone else, these children are much more likely than the other children to think that the person did it on purpose and that the person was actually doing it in order to hurt the other person. Yeah? The self-fulfilling prophecy? Yeah, exactly. So what happens, unfortunately, it isn't just that these children are aggressive in the sense that they have trouble with impulse control and so forth, but they also are perceiving threat and hostility in the world around them to a much greater extent than other children are. And you can, as you say, this can easily become a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy because if you perceive that the world is threatening, then you're more likely to act aggressively, and you're more likely to act aggressively quickly. But of course, if you act more aggressively, then other people are going to behave in a more threatening and aggressive way to you. And that kind of cycle seems to happen a lot in the context of something like a school-age playground. And one of the questions is, well, why is it that the children start out expecting more threat or aggression? Maybe part of this is a temperamental difference, but part of it is probably also things about the circumstances in which they're growing up more generally. But what is clear is once children start expecting threat and aggression, then it becomes very hard to avoid the cycle of their being more aggressive themselves. Yeah. That's a really interesting question. It certainly seems to be true in general that when we see human aggression, it very often takes the form of being a kind of defensive mechanism. And if you think about one of the things that is pretty clear is that we have a lot of, and we'll talk about this next week when we talk about moral development, we have a lot of evidence for altruism and cooperation very, very early on in development, even in infancy. So one of the puzzles is, altruism and cooperation seem like they would be such good things, why do we see aggression as well? And one idea is, when you see aggression, it tends to be across groups rather than within groups. And this sense of threat may be part of that. So if you think about hunter-gatherer culture where there's a big difference between particular groups, and the groups are competing for resources, a strategy that says, be really nice to the people that you're close to and who you trust and who you think are going to cooperate with you, but then be really aggressive to the people who are not going to cooperate with you, with the other people, the people who are the outsiders, might actually be a strategy that would lead a particular group to succeed in an evolutionary context, even if it's obviously not a good strategy when you've got a global environment. And I think even if you think about things like wars, which seem so self-defeating, it's sort of amazing how often the rhetoric about wars is, they did something, we're just defending ourselves, we're not actually being aggressive, it's the other group that's being aggressive, they're the ones who are actually causing the trouble, and we're just trying to do things to protect us. Yeah? Yeah. Right. Well, right. So we have some of those children end up sort of being rejected or being in this other category, these neglected children who are just outside of the circle of interactions that children are. But actually, I think the evidence suggests that it isn't just the fact that children are different in some way that leads them to be rejected or popular. It's more the social interactions that kind of come out of their being different in some way. So you can get children who are minority children or who are disabled children, and if they're interacting with the rest of the group, then they get the way they get treated depends on what pattern of interaction is rather than just on what it is that they're like and choose. But in a way, these neglected children are more like the case that you're talking about because there seem to be some children that are just isolated. So it's not that they're popular, it's not that they're rejected, they're just not interacting with the rest of the group. And you can imagine that, say, children with disabilities would be likely to end up in that category, just the kind of neglected, isolated children. So they're just kind of off in their own universe. Then the controversial children, as I mentioned before, these are the children that seem to have characteristics of both popular and rejected children. They're liked by some children and not by others. And I think part of this has to do with what I think of as kind of nerd machismo. So that what will happen is that sometimes these controversial children are the children who very expressly say that they don't want to be popular, they don't want to be part of the other group, and set up a group for themselves, which they actually argue or feel is superior to the other children. So there's this kind of funny paradox where you have, I think of these often as being the children who are going to grow up to write novels. You know, these are the children who are sitting in the classroom and thinking, God, you guys are such a bunch of horrible creeps. Just wait till I grow up and I write my novel about how I grew up in school and about how terrible you all were and how I managed to escape and become a sensitive writer. You know, that sort of category seems to be the kind of category that we see at least sometimes with some of these controversial and neglected children. Now, how much is your whole future determined by where you are in the pecking order when you're in school? Well, when we look at sort of sociometric stability, if you do the same sociometric analysis, say at the beginning of the school year and the end of the school year or at the beginning of the next school year, how much movement is there? How much do children stay in these roles? And how much do they change from one role to another? And maybe unsurprisingly, the children who are at either end, who are popular or rejected, tend to remain popular or rejected. And particularly, the rejected children tend to remain rejected. So once children get to be labeled or understood to be aggressive or to be victims, then as long as they're in the same kind of social network, it's very hard for them to escape from that. It's very hard for them to escape from that rejection and that position. Whereas the neglected and controversial children are more likely, sort of for obvious reasons, to be able to shift from one status to another. So maybe the controversial goth kid in 9th grade becomes the really popular leader of the class in 11th or 12th grade. Or the child who's just shy and sitting down and watching all the other children could actually become a popular child, later on in their life. And again, since all of you guys have lived this more recently than I have, you can probably think of examples of children changing their status in this way as the context in which they are functioning is different. And of course, this is particularly likely to happen when the whole social context changes. So the child who's controversial and neglected in high school, when they go to college and are in a completely different social network, can sort of start out again. Yep. Well, usually when they do these sociometric analyses, they're in groups that are already more or less socioeconomically homogenous. I think there is some relationship, but again, I don't think it's a completely straightforward relationship. And what tends to happen is that within the big group in the school, children will sort of segregate into crowds based partly on whether they're from the same ethnic background and socioeconomic status and so on. But I think the important thing to say is that these kinds of dominance relationships don't just depend on the things that seem important for outsiders. So it's almost as if, and again, if you think about school-age life as being practiced for adult life, negotiating dominance relationships, alliances, who in the pecking order, even if you're not on top of the pecking order, maybe especially if you're not on the pecking order, on top of the pecking order, figuring out how to negotiate those relationships is another really, really important thing to do. So even if you have children where somehow you start out everybody in a completely equal way, everybody's wearing a uniform, nobody knows where anybody comes from, it seems that children will reproduce this structure of dominance and subdominance in their interactions in the school-age period.